Good morning. Hi, I'm Patrick Shields. I'm the Executive Director at the Learning Policy Institute, and I'm here to welcome you to today's convening on tackling teacher shortages in California and investing in the future. And before we get started, I want to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for their financial support of the research that underwent this work, as well as to the, and very importantly, the California Department of Education and the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, who provide us technical support, access to data, and review all of our products and really help us make sense of this. We'd like you to know that there are masks available at the front desk, the registration desk, where you check in if you're feeling a little under the weather or are concerned about catching anything. Please feel free to get one of those. We do have a Wi-Fi available. There's the IHG rewards, and there's no password. And we will have questions and answers. We won't have any breaks. So if you have any questions or answers for any of the panelists, please feel free to use one of these cards in your packet and just hold it up, and a member of our team will come and get it. And with that, I want to turn it over to Linda Darling-Hammond, the CEO and President of the Learning Policy Institute. Linda?
It is great to see everyone here this morning in this wild time that we are living in. So we're going to focus this morning on teacher shortages and how to solve them as everything else is going on around us. As you all know, I think, California, like many states, has been facing persistent teacher shortages for many years, at least the last 25. Shortages began to increase again, most recently in 2015, as local control funding formula money started to come into the schools. People could hire more teachers, but the number of teacher education graduates had declined by more than half in the decade previously, and it has not really moved up all that much since then. Shortages of math, science, special education, CTE, and bilingual teachers affect all school districts. Many of you experience that, but they always affect the highest need districts the most severely. As schools then have to rely on underprepared or substitute teachers, increase class sizes, cut courses, in a variety of ways that harm the educational experience. And this problem, I just want to frame this, affects every aspect of our education system. This is not like one separate problem over on the side among all the others. No reform or initiative can be well implemented without a diverse supply of well-prepared teachers and principals who are able to work effectively together to improve schools over time in a profession to which they're committed. Retention is just as important as recruitment. 9 out of 10 vacancies each year are the result of teachers who left the year before. Teachers who are well-prepared and well-mentored stay at much higher rates. We cannot strengthen literacy instruction in our highest need schools with a revolving door of teachers who haven't been prepared before they enter and who take all the professional development they've experienced out the door if they leave early. And so we can't implement the goals of our ambitious math framework for greater access to well-taught math when 1/3 of the teachers coming in to teach secondary math are not qualified to do so, a proportion that reaches more than half in high-need schools. We can't adequately support students with disabilities who need the most sophisticated instruction when half of our teachers enter without preparation, and 40% of those who come in on waivers and permits leave within a year. Teaching expertise is the single most important element of individual student success. Everybody knows at the beginning of the school year, you say, who is the teacher, right? And that is going to determine the success of the students. As we found in a recent LPI study on positive outliers, it's the greatest predictor of collective student achievement in districts. So this is not a sidebar problem among many education concerns. It's the most fundamental problem that drives everything else that happens in our education system. Furthermore, all of the competencies we need in our society rest on solving this problem, because teaching is the profession on which all other professions depend. To address these challenges, California has invested more than $1 billion to strengthen the teacher workforce since 2019, with a focus on increasing teacher supply in shortage areas improving affordability and access to teacher preparation, incentivizing skilled teachers to work in high-need schools. Most of these programs began to be implemented in just 2021 or 2022, so they're just beginning to have an impact on the field. Data show that these programs are gaining traction, but they rely on one-time funding that is nearing expiration, prompting critical questions. Are these investments effectively addressing much-needed teacher workforce development? Do they remain essential in today's context? California has had a history of planting good programs and watering them and fertilizing them for a short period of time, and then pulling them out by the roots when the one-time funding is expired. Other states, meanwhile, have often picked up those programs and started to implement them in their states, and then we have to start all over again. So this is a moment where we could change that history. We'll consider these questions today as we hear about 3 new reports on the educator workforce from LPI, West End, and UCLA. And as we hear from education leaders, policymakers, and practitioners about what is happening and what is needed. And we're excited to have Assemblymember Al Meritsuchi, please come on up, provide opening remarks that will lead into the research presentations, an opportunity to hear from the agency leaders charged with implementing many of these investments, and then transition to practitioner voices from the field. And then we'll close with remarks from Assemblymember David Alvarez. And I want to welcome Assemblymember Meritsuchi to the stage. He is a strong champion for public education, son of immigrants, first generation college graduate from Berkeley and UCLA, so right here at home. He represents the 66th Assembly District, which is located in the Los Angeles South Bay and Harbor area. He serves as chair of the Assembly Education Committee. He has brought great knowledge, passion, and insight to this role, and has fought for equitable investments in our public education system, higher pay for teachers, freedom to learn. He co-authored the California Freedom to Read Act, which becomes even more important today than it was yesterday, to fight book bans at public libraries and many other legislative initiatives. Please join me in welcoming.
Thank you very much, Linda, and good morning, everyone. My name is Al Meritsuchi, and it's my privilege to be able to join all of the education leaders here in this room. I first of all want to thank our president of the State Board of Education, Linda Darling-Hammond, for her leadership. You know, we know that not only is she the leader of the State Board of Education, but she also has, of course, you know, the direct line to the governor in terms of all things public education. And so, you know, whenever we are discussing education policy in the legislature, you know, I'm always asking, you know, where is LDH on this? So, and let me also take this opportunity to, you know, just acknowledge, you know, these moments that we're in now. You know, I started off the year first with the Los Angeles wildfires, and then yesterday, you know, was a chaotic day for all of us in public education. You know, where we're all trying to figure out, well, what the heck is this federal funding freeze all about, and what is it going to impact? I know that that's not what we're here for today, but you know, I just want to make it you know, loud and clear that we here in the state of California, we're going to fight for public education, and we're going to fight. We are going to fight to defend the progress that we have made, you know, since the pandemic, especially, and now with these ongoing challenges that we're facing throughout the state. And we know that one of the biggest challenges that we were facing even before the pandemic, of course, is this ongoing teacher shortage. We know that you know, the teacher shortage has been most pronounced in our communities of color, in our low-income communities, and that nothing, as Linda just talked about, nothing is more important than getting a qualified, experienced teacher in the classroom. We know that that's what it's going to take, especially, you know, in our low-income and our communities of color, to close the achievement gap, to close the opportunity gap, and to make progress for all of our California public school students. And so, as Linda indicated, you know, we have made significant investments to address the teacher shortage. Some of the programs that I believe the presenters of the report are going to highlight, are investments in our teacher residency grant program, our Golden State Teacher Grant Program, and our National Board Certified Teacher Incentive Program. These are some of the many initiatives that we have launched to try to get more of our best and the brightest to want to become teachers. I also introduced a bill 2 years ago to set a goal, to increase teacher pay by 50% by 2030. And while I know I heard from all the administrators about how aspirational that is, we know that ultimately we need to close that pay gap so that we incentivize our young people to want to become teachers. And so, always a pleasure to be with the Learning Policy Institute because the legislature, we look very much to the LPI to make sure that we are making policy based on the data, based on the research, and of course led by our President of the State Board of Education. Very excited to listen to the presentation of today's report and happy to join all of you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
We have been so fortunate to have Assemblymember Mutucci leading the Assembly Education Committee these last few years, and thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to invite our panelists to come to the stage. We're going to hear about 3 research studies, and as you come up, I'm going to introduce you. Desiree Carver-Thomas, a senior researcher and policy analyst at the Learning Policy Institute. She co-leads our educator quality team. She focuses on how educator quality, teacher diversity, and leadership development can promote equitable opportunities for teaching and learning. She holds degrees from Fordham University and from Columbia University. Dr. Kai Matthews has dedicated her life to creating innovative and equitable learning environments for all students. She's an educator, researcher, and creative strategist who is passionate about liberatory pedagogies and culturally sustaining structures in K-12 education. We want to say that today. And she is executive director of the Urban Education Academy, a nonprofit organization that provides a 4-year fellowship to recruit, prepare, and support Black men in the teaching profession. She is the former research director for the California Educator Diversity Project at UCLA, and will present research from that organization. Melissa Eiler-White guides evaluation and technical assistance projects focused on strengthening teacher workforce systems at WestEd. She has designed and led formative evaluation and continuous improvement projects in the context of large-scale change efforts. Her expertise in teacher workforce issues, continuous improvement, supports clients to leverage data to make strategic and data-informed decisions about teacher workforce policy and practice. And I'm proud to say a former student of mine. And so with that, I'm going to open us to the first presentation. And start us off.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. So I'll be talking about our newest report, Tackling Teacher Shortages. And before I dive in, I just wanted to start by grounding the conversation in why it's so important that we address teacher shortages, reiterating into what has been shared already. First, we know that teacher preparation, certification, experience, and stability matter for student achievement. We see this borne out in large-scale studies in New York, North Carolina, California. We also know that preparation matters for teacher retention. So teachers who enter the profession not fully prepared are 2 to 3 times as likely to leave their positions as those who enter fully prepared. This impacts student achievement and efforts at school-wide improvement. And finally, and when we're talking about preparation, it's important to note that high-quality preparation includes coursework in pedagogy and subject matter content, as well as a substantial amount of time for student teaching, where candidates have an opportunity to get that hands-on learning and mentorship from a veteran teacher that equips them for the classroom. And finally, shortages are an equity issue. Students of color and students from low-income families are disproportionately taught by underprepared and inexperienced teachers who are more likely to leave, undermining their achievement. So in order to understand where we are with shortages in the state, we looked at a variety of teacher shortage indicators. We also looked at participation trends in the state's recent teacher workforce investments. So one of the key indicators of a shortage is the number of substandard credentials and permits that are issued each year. And that's because these are only supposed to be issued when a fully credentialed teacher is not available. So there's that shortage of fully credentialed teachers. And what we can see from this graph is that the number of substandard credentials and permits has increased dramatically over the past decade, tripling since 2013. And I want to direct your attention to the dark blue bars in each bar. These are provisional and short-term permits, or PIPs and STIPs, what we often refer to as emergency style permits, which are issued to individuals who may not be enrolled in a teacher preparation program, may not have demonstrated subject matter competency. These are growing at the fastest rates. They've increased 8-fold over the past decade, indicating that those who are the least prepared to teach are increasing at the fastest rate. And we know that substandard credentials and permits are not equally distributed across our schools and districts, and that our schools serving more English learners, foster youth, and students eligible for free and reduced price lunch are more likely to have these teachers, and that this is a problem that's especially acute in those shortage areas like math and science and so on. So fortunately, the state has invested in strengthening the teacher workforce through a series of programs, over $1 billion in programs. We focus on the largest three: the Teacher Residency Grant Program, the Golden State Teacher Grant Program, and the Board Teacher Incentive Program. So starting with the Teacher Residency Grant Program, this supports residencies, which are partnerships between local education agencies and teacher prep programs. Residencies recruit a diverse pool of candidates to meet district hiring needs. Residents typically complete a full year of residency teaching alongside an accomplished mentor teacher, while they're also completing tightly integrated coursework at that partnering preparation program. And residents receive a financial support in exchange for commitment to teach in that district for a period of time after their residency year. Previous analyses show that residents report feeling better prepared to teach than other candidates. Their supervisors report that they're very well prepared to teach and they're more likely to enter and stay in the teacher workforce than other candidates. So the Teacher Residency Grant Program supports planning residencies, implementing those programs, and also expanding existing residencies, and provides residents with a stipend of at least $20,000. And what we see is that districts are increasingly demanding residencies. The CTC has issued almost 300 grant awards through the TRGP and since 2018, and most of those have been since 2021. So indicating that there's even more interest now than when the program first began. So far, we see that about 5,000 residents have graduated their programs in the past 3 years, and many of those are TRGP funded. Residents are more likely to be people of color and to be completing programs in those high need subject areas like special education, STEM, and bilingual. And I want to just end with a quote from a program director at Sonoma State's residency program. They started with one TRGP residency in 2019, and now they have 8 programs partnering with 7 different districts in the North Bay. And with the larger stipend from the residency, they say, now that we have a larger stipend and some scholarships, we have more residents in our special ed program than we've ever had, and they're going into those really high need areas. So shifting gears to the Golden State Teacher Grant Program, this is a service scholarship that provides $20,000 to teaching candidates who will teach in priority schools once they complete their preparation. And I should note that this amount has actually been cut down to $10,000 in order to stretch the remaining funds in the grant program because it has been incredibly popular. You can see from this graph that the number of applicants has grown dramatically each year that the grant program has been in place, and also that the number of grants awarded has also increased each year. And the data are limited because the program is fairly new. So we reached out to recipients of the grant to learn more about their experience. We learned that the grant program attracted candidates to the teaching profession, some of whom may not have entertained teaching otherwise. It reduced their stress by covering tuition and other important expenses while they're completing these really rigorous programs, and that helped candidates to stay through and complete their programs. And it made entry into teaching possible for recipients who were really eager to teach in the priority schools where they're most needed. And finally, the National Board Certified Teacher Incentive Program supports participation in the National Board Program. National Board is designed to recognize accomplished teachers, and prior research shows that it's associated with supporting student academic achievement, and that National Board Certified Teachers can mentor early career teachers. The incentive program provides a $2,500 subsidy that covers the cost of pursuing National Board Certification, and then there's also a $5,000 annual incentive for up to 5 years that a National Board Certified Teacher teaches in a priority school. And what we see is that since the program was launched, the number of candidates pursuing National Board Certification more than tripled since 2022, and we see this mirrored in the number of candidates who are pursuing National Board in priority schools, and also the number of candidates who are teachers of color. So I just want to end briefly with some recommendations. The state has really laid the groundwork for strengthening the teacher workforce, and we see some early indicators that that's beginning to pay off, but it will require continued investment in these programs in order for them to really take root and bear fruit, to continue the farming metaphor. And in addition, it will be important to gather and report additional data on these programs so we understand how they're being used, how they're impacting our teacher workforce, and ultimately our students. Thank you, and I'll invite Kai.
All right, so the majority of this data is from a barriers paper that we did with Hart Research Associates, and it was looking at the barriers to entry for teachers of color and Indigenous teachers. I'm going to be focusing on primarily the financial barriers to entry. And so since I only have 7 minutes, I'm going to begin with the end. And the conclusion is that the teaching pipeline as it currently stands is not sustainable. My recommendations are that if we're serious about creating a diverse teacher workforce that reflects our student population, we need to implement debt-free or near debt-free pathways into the profession. If we're serious about making this a career path that's actually viable for individuals who dedicate their lives to this public service, then we need to deeply consider what a livable wage actually looks like. And if we are truly wanting to build and design a sustainable workforce, we have to actually reassess how we resource that pipeline and what value we're putting into the profession. In 2021, 45% of all educators had to take out a student loan to fund their education. That data is 5 years old. The average amount borrowed at that time was $55,000. Of course, for Black and Latinx students, they're more likely to take out student loans. They're more likely to take out larger amounts because of racism, capitalism, redlining, all the things that we hopefully already know impact college-going students' socioeconomic status and their access to financial aid. 1 in 5 Black students owe more than one in 5 Black teachers owe more than $100,000 in student debt. That data is 5 years old. This is life-changing debt that teachers are starting their careers with. We have to make it more affordable. This is a post-baccalaureate degree. So that means pre-service teachers are finishing college, already in debt, and then starting their teacher credentialing program that can cost anywhere from $20,000 to $35,000 for a Cal State, $40,000 for a UC, and upwards of $70,000 to $80,000 for a private institution, which half of our teachers in California are getting their credential in. Oh, are they? Oh, okay. Oh, did I not amend? Oh, sorry. Yes. That was the slide that I was talking about. So that's just them getting into the profession and getting their credential. Once they enter, California teachers earn only 78 cents for every dollar earned by other college graduates. Other professions that require a post-baccalaureate degree pay their talent almost 20% more than we do. 80% of teachers find it difficult to find affordable housing in the communities in which they serve. Over 60% find it difficult to save for long-term goals like buying a house, saving for retirement, paying for their own children's college education. Over 60% find it difficult to keep up with basic living expenses and the cost of living. Of course, this is disproportionately so for teachers of color and indigenous teachers. And it's statistics like this that make the profession hard to even swallow, to even imagine going into. We're never able to compete with other fields of industry that are attracting top-tier talent unless we level up and pay teachers what they deserve. And this is not only an equity issue, it's also a values issue. Teachers are very much aware of the discrepancy and the level of work and the demands of their workload that they're being asked to do and what they're not getting paid. They were deemed essential workers during the pandemic, essentially meaning that the rest of society could not operate properly or function properly unless they went back to work and did what they did best, taking care, nurturing, and fostering and supporting other people's children. These are just two voices from the field on the issue of pay discrepancy. Teachers are the lifeline of our future generation. Pay them like you care deeply for their unconditional care and support of your children. Only being paid during school hours, AKA when we have students, is the most insane aspect of teaching. Essentially, we're being paid for only about 50 to 60% of the workload we actually have. So, as promised, I'm going to end where I began. The current teaching profession should reflect more like this image, but it doesn't. Instead, 60% of our teaching profession is white, according to 2018-2019 data, which is 6 years old, which is another issue, which I won't get into right now. The conclusion is that our current teaching profession is unsustainable. Our teaching pipeline does not reflect our student population. It continues to suffer from teacher shortages year after year after year because we will not commit to addressing the financial burden of becoming a teacher and being a teacher. And so again, my recommendations are, if we are serious about creating a diverse teacher workforce, we need to implement debt-free or near debt-free pathways into the profession. If we are serious about making this a career pathway that's viable for individuals who dedicate their lives to this public service, then we need to deeply consider what a livable and meaningful compensation looks like. And if we truly want to build and design a sustainable workforce, we need to reassess how we resource that pipeline and how we value the profession. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. I'm here on behalf of two Westside teams, a TRGP evaluation team led by Kate Hirschbach and a collaborative effort that I'll talk about that's led by Dana Grayson, advising on both projects. So here we go. Let's see. So I'm going to talk about some of the structural issues that we face as a state in working to solve teacher shortages, inequitable distribution, and trying to diversify our profession, all the things that I know all of us care a lot about. I want to start by just saying that these issues that we've been talking about are not new issues. I think many of us in this room have been thinking about them for a long time. And from research, we really do know a fair amount about what drives shortages in the inequitable distribution of teachers, and we know a lot about the solutions too. But many of the solutions in the space of teacher workforce do require cross-institutional work. and hard cross-institutional work, whether it's districts working with higher ed partners to align supply and demand, or to deliver high-quality teacher preparation and support to teachers. But we know from work in this space around teacher workforce development that there's a lot of evidence that there's been approaches over time that have tended to be piecemeal and driven by external priorities. So essentially, the systems often operate in silos and function more reactively than proactively. So, let's see here. Do you have the right slide up? So California has signaled a really strong investment in long-term solutions with its major investments that we've heard about earlier. But large-scale implementation that's involved in implementing all of those over $1 billion of investments really does take, is a heavy lift, and it takes hard work in the field and a lot of support from the state. And as Linda touched on, the sustainability of efforts that are funded by one-time funds is another added challenge. I want to talk about an example from the Teacher Residency Grant Program, which is a long-term solution that has a lot of promise and some really positive early results, as Desiree was talking about. West Ed's formative evaluation echoes some of what Desiree touched on, that there's some really promising data points in terms of hiring, retention, and diversity in the program. But at the same time, early implementation challenges have emerged that do require special care. For example, some early implementation challenges that our evaluation work raised some concerns about the initiative's achieving the initiative's full promise and about long-term sustainability. So most programs initially weren't offering the level of financial support needed to make residencies an affordable option for residents. Evaluation data showed this posed recruitment challenges and also challenges for residents who were in the program who were reporting struggling financially. Another piece of it that we've found is that there has been, in many places, a lack of leadership awareness and real engagement in the residency as a long-term solution as part of a district strategy. So in some places, TRGB has been treated a little bit more like a grant, a limited term grant, and that has some risks involved with it because what's needed is planning for long-term sustainability of those residencies after the one-time funding is not available. And there's been other challenges that have cropped up as well with competition with the intern pathways for resources and attention. Our most recent report on scale and spread that was just released this month raised some question also just about how to expand the program while we still have time, while strengthening the programs that exist right now to ensure the impact in the districts that have committed to residency, which will really help with long-term sustainability because that needs to be a felt solution within districts for districts to commit long-term resources. So it was in this context that some of these emergent implementation challenges around the implementation of the many programs that the state invested in between 2019 and 2022. Oh, did we just take a ride somewhere here? Oh, sorry. Okay. That the State Educator Collaborative was formed in 2022. This was a collaborative that many folks here are involved with that was organized to try to work on some of the cross-institutional issues that needed attention in implementing these many programs, and to establish an effective cross-agency collaboration at the state level based on a continuous improvement approach. So you can see here, members of all the state agencies and higher ed systems that touch teacher workforce are involved in this collaborative. And one of the things that we worked on in the collaborative, Westwood is a facilitator for it, is on affordability. And that was in response to some of those early findings I was just talking about in the TRGP. And the work that was done by the collaborative really focused in on trying to solve some of the affordability challenges and blending and braiding the many different sources of funding that are available but not always hyper accessible to candidates. And so that was a real win, an early win for this cross-institutional work. The second cycle of work is focused on even more systemic issues. We know that there are really several contextual features in our state that make long-term teacher workforce planning a challenge. Just the sheer size of our state, budget cycles that fluctuate widely, and the bifurcation of state agencies that oversee teacher workforce. The collaborative really wanted to focus on issues that would be within the locus of control of state agencies and institutions to try and solve. And through an extensive prioritization process that was informed by research and experts in the field and practitioners, the collaborative concluded that addressing the core challenges that districts face in effective teacher workforce planning was a real linchpin for solving other issues. So we know that effective teacher workforce planning requires the state to align incentives, programs, communications, and support to strategic long-term workforce goals, and IHEs and districts working together in lockstep on teacher preparation and support of the existing workforce. And our investigations in this space really consistently pointed to some fragmented infrastructure in these areas. And so as part of this work, we conducted a landscape analysis, which I'll go through. I see I've got little time here. And we just asked some basic questions like, what are the statewide goals for the teacher workforce? And we found there really aren't right now statewide measurable goals that are oriented towards strengthening the teacher workforce. We also asked about who has responsibility for state and regional workforce planning. And we find that no single institution holds responsibility. It's really distributed. And what are the roles, and in that context of distributed responsibility, what roles support coordination? And we found the statute tends to encourage but doesn't mandate interagency collaboration, and we have evidence of some limited term, limited scope efforts around collaboration. So the group is working right now on developing articulating goals, roles, and processes to support this institutional work. And the hope is that with these structures, we can build a much more proactive system as a state. So I'm going to wrap up, but I want to say this work is moving forward. It's aligned with some of the work that the governor's office is working on with regard to career education, and they'll be releasing a career education master plan sometime soon. And so there's a lot of correspondence between what this collaborative is working on and the governor's master plan, and we'll be releasing a brief with some more recommendations this spring. So thank you so much.
So a lot of good research to build on. I do want to note to your point, Kai, about debt-free preparation that some years ago I was fortunate with colleagues to do a study of other countries. We looked at Canada, Shanghai, China, Finland, Singapore, and Australia. In all of those places, the government pays for teachers to become teachers because they see it as an investment in the future of the education system. So it is free. In Singapore, you also get a salary while you are training. In Finland, you get a stipend while you're training, and that's often the case elsewhere. The other thing that was interesting about your data was the idea that you do all of your work to contact parents and grade papers and all the rest of it outside of school hours, and it's uncompensated. In all of those countries, teachers have somewhere around 15 hours in the school schedule to do all those things. In the United States, it's usually about 5 or 6 hours. And so the structuring of the profession is also different. And so I think one of the things we should be doing is not only studying what we're doing, but like studying what we are the size of a country. We're the 4th or 5th largest economy in the world. We should start, thinking about how countries that are successful do it. So I want to start us off. I think we're going to get some index cards with questions, but I have a few for you. But Melissa, let me just start off asking you and then others can also add their thoughts. What do you think the goals should be?
Okay.
What should our goals be?
Well, there are goals that are in process that are organized around 5 areas that won't surprise any of you in this room. They have to do with shortages, equitable distribution, diversity, teacher supply, and teacher retention.
All right. Anybody want to add on to that before I pose the next? So let me move down the road and ask, what do you think of them? If those were our goals or others that you might want to put out there, what do you think are the most important things the state can do to achieve those? Kai, do you want to take that on?
I mean, I have to double down on the debt-free pathways. Like, money is especially now in this economy, especially because we live in one of the most expensive states in the country, it cannot not be on the table. And to ask 20-year-olds, which we're doing, to invest another $30,000 coming out of their undergraduate program, to then go and work unlivable wages and not be able to afford housing in the communities which they teach is not attractive. That's just the plain and simple of it. If we want to attract people to the field, then we need to kind of we need to think about what are the necessities that they're going to require in order to sustain. So that, and then also to your point earlier about being able to keep the folks that we actually recruit into the profession, some type of large scale effort in terms of managing and addressing the cultural issues that happen at the school site that push teachers out of the profession as well.
Thank you. Is there anyone to add to that? And let me just note that if you have questions on index cards, do you have them? Yeah. Okay. I want to be sure that Hannah's going to pull them together if they're done by.
I second everything that's been shared. I think the one thing I'll add is that I think it's important to acknowledge that there are lots of people, I count myself among them, I'm sure there are others here who want to teach or have wanted to teach in the schools where they're most needed, but that's a desire. So I think it's not just about sort of encouraging people through monetary incentives to do something maybe that they wouldn't have wanted to do, but really to tap into those individuals who that's their passion, but they're not able to make the dollars and cents work out to follow that passion. And so I think that's just an important sort of part of understanding who it is that can draw into the teaching profession is largely people who want to be teachers.
And there's a lot of interest in that. I mean, it is the conditions of the work that often drive people away. So what are some of the bright spots? You guys have all done research on the problems, but you've also seen some of the places where things are working that we ought to be aware of and building on. What would you want to name? Melissa, were you going to?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say, and it's sort of in the space of what I was talking about the cross-institutional work, I think we have examples in our state of districts and higher ed institutions that are working together really, really well, and it's very exciting, and I think it's so important. It's sort of that cross-institutional work around teacher development and teacher support is fundamental in high-quality teacher preparation and in residencies. And so we have these great examples in our state of being able to build on the momentum of those places to extend that cross-institutional work at the local, regional, and state level. I think is a real exciting area.
Yeah, I have to second that. The partnerships that you see that are happening with residency programs between the school districts and the institutions of higher education is really creating like an ecosystem of support that just didn't exist before. There are a lot of institutions that are a part of the teacher pipeline from recruitment all the way to, you know, a tenure faculty. And so having these organizations that usually we're just passing candidates from one stage to the other, now being in conversation about what is the need, what's happening, what's in the class, what's going on in the classroom that's gonna also inform what's happening in my lectures and in my in the actual residency program is actually a game changer, not only for the students themselves and the type of all-encompassing support that they get, but also in the nature of the organizations that are participating and understanding each other a little bit better. Their conversations are shifting, and so the curriculum is shifting, and then also the mentorship that is being given in the classroom is also shifting towards the betterment and improvement of the profession as a whole. So definitely the partnerships is like an invaluable type of structure that we could be leaning on a lot more, given how big our education systems here in California are. We have the UC, the Cal State, the community colleges, and our K-12 systems are so massive and also resourced individually. But if we can have some type of funding that promotes that type of collective engagement and partnership, then I think we would all be better off for it.
That reminds me that there used to be funding for school-university partnerships. That was one of those programs that was succeeding. I remember studying it, and then it was pulled up by the groups. But a good idea. Desiree, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I shared a bit about the Sonoma State residency program, but I was very heartened to learn more about that program in the course of our research. And I think what's really impressive and interesting about it is just how they've created this sort of ecosystem of residency programs in the North Bay region, even partnering with community colleges in Mendocino in order to be able to reach and support teacher development in indigenous communities and rural parts of the state, creating residency programs that meet the really specific needs of different parts of that region. So TK, bilingual, special education, sort of targeting to the needs of the district, and being able to grow to 8 programs in, you know, a handful of years using the TRTP funding has just been pretty impressive, and being able to fill those needs that districts are reporting that they have. I think shows that sort of alignment between sort of supply and demand that's really necessary.
We see that at CSU Bakersfield and some other places as well, where the programs are growing. We have a couple of questions here. We have relatively little time, so I'll ask us to be as brief. One is just factual. How long after the grants are teachers required to stay in high-need schools for the Golden State teacher grants? 4 years, yes, thank you.
It is, I think, 4 years within 8 years, so it's.
Yeah. So if you have to stop out, you can come back in, et cetera. Okay, here two people have asked questions about the working conditions, and as we think about, you know, the bright spots where there may be some, how are poor working conditions being addressed? Of course, that's a high indicator for leaving teaching. And this other one suggests that we insist on pipeline and training and then place teachers in toxic workplace environments. What are we doing in California to address workplace conditions? And maybe we should ask the question, what should we do as well, if you want to speak to either of those.
Yeah, what are we doing? That's a question that I have. I don't know of what large-scale statewide efforts that we are implementing to hold schools accountable for the conditions that they're setting. Like, we are very much obviously focused on the learning conditions for students, but not the working conditions for teachers. And
those are the same, right?
And those are the same. Like, these school environments, these learning environments are the working environments for the adults in the room. And I mean, there's a lot of conditions that are tied to how the well-being of the individuals. It's school admin. It's
how many diverse folks are allowed to be at the decision-making table. It is how parents and the outside school community is handled and received and engages with the staff, and what is done by the leadership in order to protect or, support that staff. But I don't think, we don't measure it, we don't evaluate it, we don't pay for it, so I don't know.
Let me add one thing, which is that some states do have statewide workplace condition surveys. And that might be something that would be worth considering, because then the districts and schools have data about that. The other piece, though, that I think is related is the training of school administrators, because principals know how to support a collegial supportive workplace, and of course they have to have the resources to do it as well. That can be, a big, and so we do have a 21st Century School Leadership Academy beginning to work with principals across the state, but there may be other things that we can be thinking about in that regard. I have several questions about the collaborative, so I'm going to quickly ask you to just indicate whether is it possible to include labor partners in the collaborative, even in an ex officio role? That's one question. Another
Answer is yes.
Okay, that was an easy one.
And
What are the measures and timelines for the collaborative to come up with that framework and implement it? So you've got those 5 goals. You can talk a little about the timeline and measures.
Yes. So that's a great question, and I think there's sort of multiple timelines to think about and talk about, and I don't know that I have time to talk about all those timelines, but I will say that one of the most immediate things that will happen is the collaborative is working towards consensus around the goal areas and the measurement of them, working with statewide data. So we've touched on the importance of data in various ways here, and I think the opportunity to have data that helps us understand our progress towards goals is really critical. And we do have quite a bit of data. Some of it's a little clunky to access, and some of it could be improved, and there's lots of opportunities in that space that we could talk about. But the goals and a proposed structure that will, for state level collaboration to sustain some of the work that has already begun over the last few years in the collaborative. So what would it look like to continue that as a state, to have state agencies problem solving together on priority issues? So that's the second piece. And then the third piece is, where are there opportunities to tighten roles so we're really aligning our work to those goals? And so we'll have an initial strategic framework and set of ideas that we'll share later this year. And then the hard work of putting some of those pieces into place will come and hopefully dovetail, as I mentioned earlier, with some of the Governor's Career Education Master Plan implementation work.
All right, in our last minute, what do you think is the research that we need to continue to solve the problems that we're addressing?
I think I'll start with something I think came up with for all of us, which is we need the really up-to-date and robust data systems in order to conduct research on all of these questions. I think we've all run into issues with having up-to-date data on who's even in the workforce today. So that makes it really hard to understand, what preparation kind of program did they come from? What do we know about residency completers and retention today and not just a few years ago? If someone receives a Golden State Teacher Grant program, Golden State Teacher Grant, what credential are they earning, and when do they complete that credential? When do they get hired? Where do they get hired? How long do they stay there? Those are all questions that we should be able to answer with data that already exists, if those data systems that already exist were kind of in alignment and talking to each other without adding an administrative burden on districts and teacher prep programs to track down individuals and make phone calls and all of that.
Thank you.
Financial models that are effective in retaining teachers, specific work conditions that are effective in retaining teachers, strategies and skill sets that teacher leaders need in order to retain teachers and provide holistic working conditions. And then also veering off a little bit from the research, just like more investment in action groups. Like the research is there. It hasn't really changed so much in the past couple of decades. Yeah, we have updated information, but we all kind of know everything that we just said today on this panel. Like it's known information, and so at this point, I think a lot of investment needs to be put into into the action of implementing some of the recommendations that we've been saying for years, instead of going into the void.
All right. Yeah, Melissa, you go the last
I'm
word.
just gonna double click on what Desiree had to say. It is a urgent priority to upgrade some of our data systems, and we do not have a statewide residency identifier. That is an urgent need. It's underway and it could be done. We have data systems that don't talk to each other on really critical priorities for the state that we've been talking about. For example, bilingual education, TK, and educator diversity in shortage areas. Our data systems aren't tracking all the data that are needed or do not align to one another, and it makes research in this area really difficult. So there's a huge opportunity there. And I think that with that, to have accessible data to help us really understand progress that's readily available it could be a real game changer.
Thank you. Awesome. Let's thank And I'm going to invite to the stage Tara Kinney, who is the Chief of Policy at the Learning Policy Institute, and she is going to help us learn from our state agency leaders. I'm about to consider me the first. And I'm going to invite the panelists. I guess you're going to invite them.
Yeah, I would like to invite the panelists up. I think we'll be save time. So please come join me on the stage. So I have the enormous privilege of getting to introduce our next panel, where we'll get to hear from state agency leaders about the implementation of the 3 programs that we've been learning about this morning. They are a group of superstar leaders. You can read their full bios in the program. I'm going to briefly introduce them. Daisy Gonzalez is the Executive Director of the California Student Aid Commission, the largest financial aid system in the country, where she's responsible for administering over $3.5 billion in financial aid programs. Before that, she was the second highest administrator for California's community college system, as well as a consultant for the California Assembly Appropriations and Budget Committees. Mary Vixie Sandy is the Executive Director of the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, where she leads public policy related to educator preparation and licensing and directs an agency that awards over 300,000 credentials per year. Ingrid Roberson is the newly appointed Chief Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction at the California Department of Education. Dr. Roberson most recently served as the Senior Advisor of Research Learning at the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, where she spearheaded the I3 Data Research Learning Network for counties and districts. Before that, she was Associate Superintendent of Academic Services at the Alameda County Office of Education. A big thank you to our panelists for joining us today. I want to remind you guys, you all have the index cards. Please jot down questions as we go, and we will really try to get through them at the end of this panel. But this is we're going to be on a fast churn on this panel, a little faster than the last one. So apologies in advance if I feel like I'm moving around along. And I think we all know how important program implementation is and what a heavy lift it is. You know, we we bow to you all who are doing that hard work of implementation. It is not glamorous work, but it's really what turns the big investments that we've made at the state level, right, into meaningful change on the ground for students and for the educators that serve them. So we're going to dig into some of these 3 big bets that California has made in order to better attract, prepare, and retain a strong and stable, diverse educator workforce. There's a lot of interest in learning how these programs are working, as we can see from the fulcrum today. So Daisy, I'm going to start with you. We heard a lot about financial burden on the last panel and how important that is. So I would like you to unpack for us, how is the Golden State Teacher Grant Program going? What do we know about its impact, and what does implementation look like at your agency?
Good morning, everyone. I first want to start off by attesting that we're all here and awake, and really get to know you in the way that our Golden State Teacher Grant Program recipients experience the systems that we have all created together. I know many of you have been a part of making sure that we could have the Golden State Teacher Grant Program today, so thank you for your work. Thank you, LPI, for studying the impact of this program. So let me just quickly ask, raise your hand if you have been inspired by a K-12 educator in your lifetime. Great. Raise your hand if you actually then became an educator in K-12. Raise your hand if you are still in that profession. Exactly. That is the experience of many of our Golden State Teacher Program grant recipients, and in fact, I hear it is really expensive to be poor. That is actually what our grant recipients say. I'm here with great urgency and a lot of humility as I'm starting off my new role. I have been in this role for 6 months, and the Golden State Teacher Grant Program has been very personal to me. I was that teacher that left after 2 years in the classroom as a dual enrollment teacher. I was on a special permit, I had a waiver, and I left the classroom to change policy. And I'm here. That was in the year 2009. But we are solving systemic problems and we need systematic solutions. And it's really important that we think about the 3 programs that you have on this panel in that way. It is a systematic solution to address the pipeline issue. And the Golden State Teacher Grant Program is operated by the California Student Aid Commission to meet students where they are when they need us. It is a financial aid program. And in the year, just as Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond mentioned, in 2021-22, we received a really big augmentation. And in that year, we were able to then transform that program. But it was a program that started off with just that year, 2,714 recipients. To where we are today with this latest infusion of funding to really stabilize the program last year. And we are now at 24,502 students by the time we have to implement this year. It has undergone tremendous changes though. We now, as of last year, because of the trailer bill changes, have to operate 3 different cohorts with requirements. So actually the grant ranges from 10,000 to 20,000. And with 3 different cohorts, you have 3 different deadlines and 3 different commitments. So our students actually have to serve between 2 and 4 years in that placement. But what I can tell you is it has been a great success. We are ramping up, and we know what we need to do when we think about solving these problems in a systemic way.
Daisy, thank you so much, and I think what you just shared illustrates the complexity of administering these programs and adapting over time, and also refining them, right, and adapting to our fiscal context. It's just constantly changing. So, and I know there's so many tensions in that. Mary, I want to turn to you next. So we heard on the earlier panel about the impact of the residency grant program and the strength of some of the partnerships we're seeing sprouting all over the state. Can you share what you are seeing in terms of what has the CTC learned that enables high quality residencies to sprout and to thrive?
Absolutely, and thank you. Thank you to all the educators in the room. Those who are still in the classroom or preparing people for the classroom or working in policy to change conditions. You are my people. It's great to be with you today. So key to the whole effort, of course, is funding. Over $600 million being invested in this enabled us to get something started. The structure of this funding also included planning grants, because planning grants were necessary to introduce partners that maybe weren't working together in this sort of way, from higher education and from local school districts. So the planning grants gave them time to get to know one another, to conceptualize together, to put together how is the curriculum going to work, how are we going to enroll, how many can we enroll. Key to the effort was the investment. So for planning, and then there's the implementation stage, and then there's the expansion stage. So I think there was wisdom in the way that was structured. It had a long-term view in it, and which is necessary to get this started. The data after 4 years is promising. 5,000 teachers have come through, are in residency programs right now. We know that about 70% of that population are non-white candidates. They are people of color who are moving into our residencies and into our schools, which is a key part of our diversity goal here in the state of California. And so that's been really quite critical. And so building and sustaining the partnerships and making sure that they are adequately funded to staff appropriately. I think our school districts are so accustomed to getting funding, and somebody said this earlier, that lasts for a period of time and then you move on to the next thing. I think there's a certain rhythm for the people who bring those funds in. They get very intense about implementation, and then their eye moves to the horizon, because that's the way we're doing this. That doesn't work for residencies. Residencies need to be a core part of your normal operations. And I would like to see, and with this kind of funding, initially my hope and goal was that every teacher preparation program that we accredit in the state would have access and would be able to initiate the partnerships with our LEAs to get them interested. Because LEAs are trying to educate our students. Teacher prep is trying to educate our teachers. We need them both. But the drivers quite often really need to be the teacher education programs, because they know what they're doing, and they can begin to map that with an LEA to get that done. So I think that's also a key thing, and we've got some great partnerships. That Sonoma State, fantastic work. You start with a small cohort, and then you reach out to 8 of the LEAs that you're sending teachers to. That's fantastic. We've seen that kind of thing with Alder Graduate School also, with Cal State Fresno. With some others. So it's beginning to really take and become normal operating practice for some places, but it's early days, and we are expending the last $60 million of this funding we expect this year.
Yeah, Mary, I saw a lot of heads nodding in this room when you talked about that culture shift from seeing it as just a grant to be administered and one that will go away to one that is really a normal way of how school district do operations. And that vision is one that we want to see taken up. Thank you. Ingrid, turning to you next. So you're charged with administering the National Board Teacher Incentive Program. That's really, I think, the focus of that program is different than the other two that we've heard today, in that it's really focused on teacher retention, and certainly financial aid grants and teacher residencies are a big piece of that too, but your program really does focus on teacher retention at its core. So can you provide an update on the efforts to implement this program, and where are we now?
Yeah, most definitely. Good morning, everyone. Really glad to be here. I've learned so much and was so inspired, and definitely heard the call around data. So that was duly noted, coming from the California Department of Ed. Daisy, you're 6 months ahead of me. I actually officially start on Friday. So you've got me fresh and new. So this is top of my priority list right now. The National Board Certified Teacher Incentive Program really is, I think, speaking to what Kai mentioned, centered on compensation, really around retention. And this is part of our Teacher Leadership Policy Division. We have Dr. Susan Olson here. Just so you know, the incentive application just closed, the subsidy just closed on the 10th of January. We have about over 2,000 applications, as well as having the incentive part of the application just closing this Friday. So Susan and team are about to look at a whole bunch of applications. The subsidy piece actually puts $2,500 towards becoming nationally board certified. And if you don't know, it costs $1,900 to become nationally board certified as you go through all 4 components. So as was mentioned in the research, we went from 415 pursuing national board certification in 2021 to over 2,000. It was actually 2,379 in the last school year. So wow, we'll talk about an impact in having more of our accomplished teachers really getting recognized. The incentive part is a real incredible piece because it's up to $25,000, and you have to be serving in a high priority school, which is defined as 55% or more of unduplicated pupils. And right now we have half of our nationally board certified teachers actually working in high priority schools, which is what we were looking for. I think an example of like what this program can do is I would take a look at LA Unified School District, because what they do is they add on 15% in terms of compensation. 7.5% is just in recognition of being this accomplished teacher, and another 7.5% comes to doing 92 additional hours above and beyond classroom duties for such things as mentoring new teachers. And that's what we're looking for, right? There's compensation, there's also creating the kind of community that we want so that teachers stay in for a long time. Just so you know, LAUSD just this past Saturday had their 21st National Board Certified Teacher Conference. So talk about creating culture and the kind of community that we're looking for. I think the other piece that we're starting to see at CDE as we're administering this is looking at the research that's coming out of UCLA and Stanford. If you don't know, actually the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards just partnered around the California Black Educator Initiative. The goal is to bring in 900 Black educators. This is being done with UCLA and Center X, and it's giving an entire support program to be able to accomplish this. I actually have been in OUSD, and even just having this incentive program, if you take a look at step 4, they're only making $65,250. This program, as Dr. Olson describes, it actually puts money in the pockets of teachers. This is a 7.6% increase above and beyond just getting this $25,000, $5,000 a year to work in high priority schools. So again, it's an honor and a privilege. We're about to look at, nearly 5,000 applications that are all coming in this month.
Thank you. Yeah. So we all gotta get the word out this week before Friday.
That's right.
The teachers we know, get those applications in to be reviewed. Just to highlight, the program is tackling compensation issues, equity issues, because we're recruiting, retaining those teachers to serve in our highest need schools, providing mentoring for novice teachers, right, and a real community at schools and districts around improving practice, right, awareness of practice, and school improvement ultimately. So I think that, this program tackles many of our challenges in one place. I know we're going to get questions, and I welcome those from the audience shortly, but I'll kick it off with one, because in picking up on the themes that Melissa raised around state collaboration, your 3 agencies implementing 3 different programs, but I know you all are working together on that. So can you unpack that a little for us? What does partnership look like for you across these agencies, and in ways that may not be visible to everybody who's working on these issues? I don't know, who might like to start first?
I'm happy to start since you both are fairly new to the collaborative. Unless you already know the answer, in which case let me step back. It's the problem that brought us together was that we had a $1 billion investment in ending the teacher shortage, and pieces of that were across multiple state agencies. We had $20,000 funding formula per resident. So if an LEA enrolled 10, you do the math, 10 residents, that's how much funding they had to work with, and about 10,000 of that was set aside for the resident, which, thank you, Kai, for your constant focus here on, we need this to be not just affordable, but why don't we just make this free? 10,000 isn't enough for them to get out of their Starbucks job. It's just not. So having the ability to braid it with the Golden State Teacher Grant was a key part. When that was funded at $20,000, that gave us about $30,000, which is still a little over half what an entry-level salary is or what an intern salary is in the school. So why is an LEA going to partner to end the teacher shortage with something that we're, interns are gonna be, candidates are gonna be more attracted to an intern role because they have a salary. They don't know yet at the early stages that they won't have the kind of support structure that a residency program provides, or the learning opportunities immediately while you're in practice that a residency program provides. But the insufficiency of funds and the need to braid resources across the different agencies, so we all are sharing in this goal of ending the teacher shortage by putting together our best thinking, putting together dashboards, putting together MOUs that continue. We all have agreed we're going to keep our data up to date so that we know kind of and can inform the larger communities about what's happening. So that's what brought us together, and I think it's a really key thing for us to do at the state level. We can't run the ground game. We can't even do very well at the intermediate ground game. So funding for the SRTAC, the State Residency Teacher Assistance Center, getting the counties involved, the teacher residency lab, these are more the intermediaries between what the state does and what the ground game is. But if we're doing our work well, we've resolved some problems about how to make this a possible pathway.
I'll go next. So I was in the Appropriations Committee, and I see some of our legislative colleagues for the Assembly Appropriations Committee when the Golden State Teacher Grant Program was actually designed. And we contemplated this idea of collaboration. I'm happy to see the coalition coming back together and really thinking about that collaboration. But those are the right people in the room, plus all of our labor representative colleagues, right? And all of the allies that are really in this room today. So I have a mini list. There's what I've seen with fresh eyes that we do really well, and then the opportunities, and then being inspired by the previous panel. So on the onset, that the legislation already encourages, and in many ways to operate the Golden State Teacher Program already requires that collaboration with CDE, who sets the standard for what are the institutions that would qualify that a teacher could go and teach at, to really the CTC, which gives us that list of what happened to those students, and then what is that educational program that is allowed. Many, many changes, as I mentioned, to this program, but really great collaboration with the State Board of Education, who has also made this a really key priority through Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond. But I think the opportunities, borrowing from the previous panel, really thinking about even spaces like today, right? You see that we are new in our role in convening us to think about this work in new ways. One of those things is really thinking about our joint advocacy as we head into this next legislative session. I mentioned that this is a part of an ecosystem, right? It's a pipeline issue that we are trying to solve for, that requires a systematic solution. So for me, what I see today is really, we are trying to tackle together the social determinants of teacher success. So we're really talking about financial aid, because it allows you to pay for your living expenses, the development and support that your programs offer, and then pay equity. And that's that ecosystem. So joint advocacy, really thinking about our joint ability to share our impact of our programs in a collective way. Data sharing, for example, CSAC right now doesn't have an automatic way to get credential attainment, employment data, or any demographics of the students that are a part of the program. And joint outreach, right? We mentioned our labor representative colleagues. CSAC has had to fund a lot of that outreach through philanthropy, but what would it look like for our 3 organizations to join together? One of my meetings today is with the Department of Developmental Services, and then really thinking about even EDD, so unemployment. All of the spaces where many of our aspiring teachers went, raise your hand if you've ever had to get unemployment as a teacher. Okay. So those are just some examples as we're thinking about that. And then the last thing I'll mention is this program, the Golden State Teacher Program. It is open to our 8540 CADA applicants. So those are DACA students. However, we have not found a way to then help those students earn that financial aid and then get into a living wage paid job in the state of California. So I throw that out there as an opportunity for all of us to serve every Californian.
I'm going to move us into the next question and give it to you first, Ingrid. And I think we just probably have time for one question. I'm folding 2 into it here. So there are a couple of questions here about pipelines into the profession, because we have seen, over time, and we saw the data on the chart, decline in teacher preparation enrollments. And so the questions are like, Do we need more pipeline incentives for high school and community college students to begin pathways into the profession? Another question is about how is California thinking about apprenticeships as a strategy to address the teacher shortage? So I don't know if you want to launch into that first, and then others can follow.
Yeah, most definitely. So we do know in terms of our career pathways work that education is part of that. So I definitely do think the more that we can introduce this early on, I do want to say, I want to second what Kai has said around making sure it's debt-free, because these are real conversations that young people are having as they think through what professions they're going into. But I think career pathways can definitely be one of our big strategies. Also in terms of the community college system, half of our public students go to community college. And so a lot of times, yes, the UC system, yes, the CSU system, incredibly important. But as we know, the majority of our students really rely on the community colleges. So I think that that's a strategy and a place where we need to really be thinking and introducing and making sure that there are apprenticeships in that way for students to come into this profession. But it's not going to happen without the compensation. So I do want to second what you were saying, Daisy, about all of us advocating, because we already know that that $250 million, on the incentive side is coming to an end in terms of 26. Though we are excited to see that there's potential for another $100 million in the governor's budget. So we do have to keep all of these programs going.
Daisy, Mary, is there anything you want to add on to that?
Sure, I'm happy to. So we have had, for decades now, we have funded at different times a classified teacher grant program that supports someone who already holds an AA degree to complete a baccalaureate degree while they're working as a classified staff person. And that funding has been critical to kind of building that pipeline and helping them get over the BA hump and into a teacher credentialing program. If you braid your resources well and have your classified grant bleeding into or braiding into a residency program, and you've got Golden State teacher funding to back the whole play, you've got not quite free, but a fairly significant funding stream to support that kind of career pipeline into teaching. But again, these are grant programs. This is not part of anybody's formula funding yet. So again, I appreciate Desiree and Kai and Melissa pointing out that, how serious about this are we? Because it's just too hard. It's just too hard to get those three programs figured out. If you're working as a classified person in the school, how do you figure out that you need to braid resources and that there's a way to do that? What we've done with the collaborative is build some resources into the commission's website for what are your pathways? What are career opportunities? Where are you on the path, and what's next possibly for you? And what are the resources that can support you along the way? It's something, it's not everything. But it's critical, and the community colleges are an absolutely key player in this process. And apprenticeships. Okay, there's been legislation, we've been working on apprenticeships for a while, trying to figure out how to make that work. It's a different culture. Apprenticeships live in a different culture for many of the professions than the education culture. There are ways, and we are, I think, inching closer to figuring out how to have a good pathway that's an apprenticeship pathway. I think that is very much a possibility for our early childhood workforce moving into the state preschool. I think there's some ways to really make that a solid pathway for that workforce. It's
We already have some strong models there in early childhood in California and other states we can learn from as well. I am getting the nod. Thank you, Melanie. So join me in thanking our wonderful panelists. Invite my colleague Efren Mercado to the stage, the Director of California Policy, to moderate our next panel.
Are you heading back, Lucia?
No.
No. Oh.
I don't do this. You have been there?
Yeah.
Hello. I'm going to invite our panelists up to the stage, please. And I'll start off with Anna Marie Prince. Yeah, come on, please. Associate Dean of UCLA School of Education and Information Studies. Anna Marie's a teacher, educator, board leader. Her work focuses on equity and building coalitions with state and agencies, community-based organizations, and philanthropic organizations to address critical issues facing our society through high-quality, community-engaged education information. Thank you, Anne Marie. Marquita, come on down. Marquita Shire, Professor Emeritus in the College of Education at CSU Long Beach. She's also the chair of the CTC and chair of the board of directors of the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. Thank you, Marquita. And Leslie. Leslie Whitman has been educator since 1992, is currently the CTA Vice President, and she teaches AP US History, Economics, and Government at Hart High School in the William S. Hart Union School District in Santa Clarita, and previously served as the CTA Secretary Treasurer for the past 4 years. Welcome, Leslie. And then Natalie, come on down, guys. Natalie Paul Lund is the Director of TK-12 Policy at Trust West, and she joined at Trust West in 2014, and she has supported the Oregon's policy research, analysis, and community development, primarily in equitable funding and accountability, and her work's always been grounded in equity and impacting our communities. So thank you very much for everyone joining us. For this panel, obviously we have very esteemed folks here. We're so grateful for them to be here. Really appreciate it. We're going to jump straight into a couple of quick questions. I'll direct them to our folks. So, for Marquita and Anne Marie, you both are, and I'll start with Marquita and Anne Marie, uniquely positioned due to your roles on the CTC, but also with higher education in general and systems that you've worked with for most of your careers. What has been the most helpful in getting higher ed to begin to increase their teacher education enrollments and graduates in high retention programs, including residencies, and what more is needed to get university production and support of teachers to levels that can help solve the shortages? That's a mouthful, so take your time.
In just a few minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Like many of you, I worked on the issues that we're talking about this morning in terms of the teacher shortage from a variety of spaces. And I came to this conversation a little discouraged given our current context. But I'm going to walk away from this conversation encouraged and with optimism to move forward given who's in the room right now. So I'm just going to reiterate a couple things about teacher shortages that I think are really important. This is a national problem. The research from LPI has been so informative for over decades. It has not gotten considerably better over the last 50 years. Teacher shortages are a national problem, they're systemic, chronic, and they impact groups of students differently. That is, a 2020 LPI report indicates that students with disabilities are more likely to be taught by an underprepared teacher than their non-disabled peers. This differential impact should be of great concern to all of us. So in terms of enrollment, CTC's annual teacher supply report, which is just this report so full of rich data, indicates, among many findings, two things I just want to point out. Fiscal year 2022-23 marked a decrease of the number of new credentials issued for the second year in a row, following a steady increase in the prior 7 years, and there was a decrease in the number of newly issued credentials for all 3 basic credentials. So teacher preparation clearly plays a vital role to recruit and prepare candidates. We also work alongside our district partners to retain a qualified teacher workforce. The work has always been about generating a supply of teachers that are responsive to the ongoing demand to ensure that all students, including students with disabilities, are taught by well-prepared and culturally responsive teachers. But, as pointed out in a recent report from the National Academy of Education in 2024, this goal cannot be accomplished by teacher preparation programs alone. Policy from federal and state agencies is necessary if we're finally going to systematically address teacher shortages, and contextual support, we've heard from our colleagues, incentives for teaching, debt-free teaching, affordable access to teacher preparation, and improved teaching conditions is absolutely vital. We know this. So teacher preparation programs have worked for decades on a number of pathways, and residencies are, of course, one important one. I won't reiterate the research that our West State colleagues presented this morning, but they are an important pathway at an institution of higher education, but they're only one pathway. And the recent investment
of course, is unprecedented. And with 4 years left, we see that residency programs are demonstrating a very positive return on investment. But these programs take time, resources, and commitment from all segments. To quote a colleague, we need the continued commitment and support from the governor's office to the principal's desk, and everybody in between. This ecosystem of support that was mentioned earlier is absolutely vital. In terms of what more is needed, we already talked about the statewide workforce collaborative, and Melissa gave us a somewhat deep dive into that work, and I think that is extremely promising in bringing together the folks that are, many of who are sitting in this room, to continue to address this systematically.
Thank you, Marquita, appreciate it. For Anna Marie, in your view from UCLA and also your role in CTC, what do you want to add to that discussion?
Before I add, I just want to give a shout out to the previous speakers in panel. It makes it easier when all of the data is laid out, policy implications are laid out, because then you get to tell the stories on the ground, which I'm a former kindergarten teacher, so the stories are plenty. I really love this question because it's a question that asks about recruitment and retention. And you heard multiple times this morning about the creation of an ecosystem, right? And an ecosystem requires not just a diverse group of people at the table, but an interdependence across all the people at the table. And so I'm going to come back to that ecosystem in the 5 points that I want to make. And it's going to be fast. I see you looking at me, I'm trying to make it fast. The first thing in terms of recruitment and retention, and I think I speak on behalf of the CSUs as well as our independent colleagues, is we are finding that we're able to recruit young people that we're recruiting have a strong commitment to high-touch, values-driven programs. And when I say values-driven, they're going into this work because they want to make a difference and change the world in ways that we've not seen in the past. And to Kai's point, Dr. Matthews' point earlier, we owe them as a system to operate in a way that upholds the same values that they're coming into the profession with. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, we heard a lot about the different pathways and the different folks at the table along the pathway. I love collaboration. I think tried and true, you can't do this work without collaboration and without strong partners. And I think we see those partnerships within the ecosystem of educator preparation and support. Preparation prior to entering the field, but we have to pay attention to ongoing job-embedded professional learning from aspiring through accomplished in equal measure. Because I'm afraid that I'm spending a lot of time getting young people in the door. I send them out into the world, and I call them up 2 years later, and they're like, it was just too hard. Working conditions are too hard. So the way that we've been thinking at the IHE level about these ecosystems is doing just that. Think preparation through retirement, really. What are the supports and organizations that have high-touch, values-driven, and that we're keeping our candidates in a familiar, high-touch pipeline. So we see centers like the CSU Center for Closing the Opportunity Gap, UCLA Center X, UC San Diego has CREATE. I believe that University of San Diego has a new
Center for Black Educator Excellence.
The Center for Black Educator Excellence, and I knew I was going to forget because I wrote it down. The Center for Embodied Equity and Neurodiversity at the University of San Diego. And all of these centers, and I could, there's many of them, but what they're doing is in preparation, creating these high-touch, value-driven programs, but also making sure that they come back to the Center for Ongoing Professional Learning. They come back to the center to learn how to be effective school leaders, so that those school leaders, they too have the sensibility around access and equity, and they're teaching their leaders who more and more often, folks, are really, create working conditions for young people and the educators to serve them, and they're 26 years old. It's unheard of. But guess what? We're not gonna be mad at that. We gotta support that. And creating these ecosystems gets us closer. 2 more points. I won't vacillate around multiple pathways. I think that point has been made. But I really appreciated Superintendent Robertson. Ingrid's point about community college partnership. Because those young people reflect the communities that we serve, and the same communities we've heard over and over again this morning are always the ones left at the margins, always the ones getting the least qualified teachers, the least resources, and so they become invisible eventually. And I do believe that teacher apprenticeship programs and teacher apprenticeship degree programs have a real possibility to change the trajectory of folks that go through the community college system. And the last thing I'm going to say quickly is, I said I was a former kindergarten teacher, and I've been in teacher education since 1999. And one thing that I know for sure after all these years, don't be shocked that I've been in the profession for so long. Everything that I know about creating systems that support aspiring and through accomplished teachers, I actually did learn in kindergarten. And it's about the braiding of resources to making sure that you are serving the whole child, affecting the whole system. It is about intersegmental partnerships that provide, that are both strategic. It's about collaboration, but not touchy-feely collaboration. It's strategic collaboration that takes the best out of what each institution has to offer to serve the best aspiring teachers, to go through the system and create the best schools for the best educational system in the United States, which should be in California. That's all
You guys are touching on one of my pet peeves, the warm and fuzzy collaboration drives me insane. I like real collaboration. I'm going to throw it over to Leslie. Leslie, I feel like a lot of the points from earlier were coming from the critical notes that when I was working with you at CTA, the teacher shortage work group internally and all that work about working conditions. I just want to throw it over to you to kind of talk about CTA's view on teacher shortage and things that we should be doing. And I'm sure it ranges on a lot of different pieces. Just want to throw it to you to kind of provide some insight there.
You know, it's glad to follow after everybody else's stuff, and so I'm not going to really go into the pipeline stuff, although I agree 100,000,000% with everything that had been said in regards to that. And I just actually want to talk about what the current work is and what the current state is. And I think that that's actually bring really the teacher voice into that. And 2 things. One is the Center for Economic and Policy Research dropped their study today on California teacher pay. And so there's, and basically in just the brief summary, you can go see it, is the teachers today are earning 76.2 cents per every dollar for a similar profession, as compared to 95.2 cents in 1991. So that just, current research brings that home. And then we, as the California Teachers Association, released a survey of 2,000 of our members, for which I have a box of these if folks want to take it at the end, where we surveyed 2,000 of our members, TK through 12, across the state, and asked what their thinking is and where they're at. And I think that really it's just that we are all spread too thin. And we can't make ends meet. So 84% of the teachers surveyed cannot afford to live near the schools where they work. A similar percentage said that their salaries are not keeping up with the cost of everyday goods that we all need to survive: groceries, gas, childcare. 4 in 10 California educators are considering leaving the profession in the next few years, and 77% say that financial strain is influencing that decision. We had a huge win with HR 82, which brought back Social Security fairness and eliminated the offset. And so folks who actually earned 40 the quarters to get that are looking really seriously at, does that gap what they could collect from STRS, and will that have the veteran teachers leave early? But it also is a pipeline potential for folks who will not have their retirement impacted by coming into the STRS profession. And so that's a huge piece. But I do want to also, we've talked about salary, but we haven't actually talked about healthcare. And I think that one thing is that there's a misconception that we have awesome benefits. But the reality is we have a lot of educators paying at least $1,500 a month out of pocket for healthcare. Some are paying even more. And that's in a low salary, high cost for benefits. It just makes the situation even more untenable. All of that though to say, 77% of the educators surveyed said that they are satisfied with their jobs. True testament to the passion that we feel for our profession and public education. We love teaching. The system though is not sustainable. And so we are truly concerned about recruitment and especially about retention. That these are the folks that are coming to teach in classrooms next door to us. We want strong teachers in all of the classrooms so that we can build California's future together. And that's what we're focused on, and that's what we're working on.
Thank you, Leslie. Yeah. I'm just really glad you said groceries and the price of eggs.
Look at there are no eggs anymore.
I really think that the point that you made in terms of the job satisfaction really goes, it dovetails with what Anne was saying with the high values of folks coming into the profession, which has just been tremendous. And I know the educators I meet, my sister, my mom is retired, but just that the idea of how awesome they are, for my family, obviously I'm biased, that they're awesome and they want things for the right reasons. I'm going to switch over to Natalie. Natalie, at Trust West, you all have been one of the leading voices in the education system. How do we think the current state investments are helping us to achieve these goals, and what should the path forward be to really meet that?
Thank you for the question, and also thank you to the great insights that we've heard throughout this entire event. I really appreciate folks lifting up these significant needs because they reflect the experiences of educators of color in our system. The programs like the Golden State Teacher Grant Program, teacher residency programs have been significant, mostly because it's an acknowledgement from state leaders that this is an issue that we need to address. And there's been somewhat of an equitable focus in how those programs have been administered. There's still a lot more to be done to get to where we want to be in terms of our educator workforce reflecting the students that are in our system. And I think the first interim step, and it's one that's already been mentioned today, is that we need to be able to evaluate these programs to see the degree to which they've been effective in concrete numbers for bringing more diverse educators into the workforce. So we need that data. We need educator demographic data. We need to be able to see it at the district and school level. And without that data, there's not much folks who are motivated to address these issues to do. We need to have that information. And then in the longer term sense, and this is something that's come up multiple times, is that educator compensation is a huge barrier to educators of color and multilingual educators coming into the system and being able to stay in the system. And what that really comes down to is that as a state, we need to be bringing more resources into our system. So that means we need to think about how we're going to generate revenue as a state. How are we going to leverage the juggernaut economy that we have in this state that, rivals countries across the world? And the Education Law Center recently released their 2024 update to their report around states' education funding. And California received a D for funding effort. And that is a measure of a state's GDP against the levels of per pupil funding. So that is an indication that California could be doing much more because of the size of our economy to support our education system generally. But what that really means is
investing in educators. It's the number one cost of our system, and we're not doing justice to the amazing work that educators of color do in this country, in this state.
Thank you so much, a round of I'm going to jump into one question and then we're going to pivot over to Mr. Alvarez. I'm going to do this one. I saw a couple questions come in earlier. I'm not sure who to throw this to, so I'm throwing you guys kind of a curveball a little bit, but you'll be fine. How and when can we be more inclusive with data collection and research on early childhood teacher workforce shortage issues, needs, connections to the PK3 credential, and multi-subject alignment? Thank you. Very kind. Yeah. Who wants to take that one? Natalie?
I'll go ahead
Yeah.
and start. I think we've heard throughout the morning that we need data systems to talk to one another, and I know that's been a state priority for a number of years, and so perhaps we have an opportunity now with the early childhood credential flourishing in some places to continue that effort and to continue to fund all the agencies that are sitting around this table talking to one another. The statewide collaborative work group that some of us are involved in, that issue has come up again and again and again, and so I know state leaders hear that. We need support to make that happen, and I hope I don't get in trouble, Mary. We need to move the credentialing data system, talking to the other systems, to the top of the list, so we can keep track of all these amazing programs that we've invested over $1 billion in over the last 4 years.
I think that I would just add, that's not the question I wanted to answer.
You do what you want to do.
I was just going to add, the other thing I learned in kindergarten is always asking the question, what can we learn from da 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 da. And LDH mentioned that this morning, learning from other countries, learning from other states and whatnot. I don't think we do enough of that. I think that and we don't learn partially because we don't have readily accessible data to learn from. This isn't going to be popular, what I'm going to say either.
Say it.
Go there, girl.
I agree. Okay, I'm going to rephrase. For me, there's an arrogance around not learning, not willing to learn from each other. And we cannot do this by ourselves. We cannot do this without building on the lessons learned from other places and other people. And we're in a crisis. We gotta remember, we are kindergartners, we are learners. We need to learn and we need to implement. And I'm just gonna shout out about this one-time funding. I'm gonna tell you quickly the story of Maria. I had an opportunity to talk to the National Center for Teacher Residency folks yesterday. And they told me a story about Maria, who was a paraprofessional. She made $18,000 a year. She had 3 children. She was fortunate enough to get into a teacher residency program. She left that program not only debt-free, but earning almost 3 times as much as she had been earning as a paraprofessional. So that impact wasn't just for her credentialing. It wasn't just for her kid. This is an opportunity to change community, to change people's livelihood. And when people feel safe and secure and able to live a high quality life, they engage to make sure that we continue offering those things to the next generation. So I'm answering the one-time funding and why it's important to sustain that funding. I want Maria to be here. I'm speaking for Maria and her family. I've never met them, but there are literally thousands of them graduating from community college, changing careers and don't know what to do, graduating from undergraduate programs, want to go into teaching, don't think that they can afford it. Let's go out there and change the conditions and the pathways for Maria and folks like her.
Do you want to make the point, please?
Yeah. All this data collection is phenomenal, But if we don't actually look at a map and make sure that we have programs in every part of the state, then we're gonna forget a key piece. We have rural communities that have no access to a four-year university, let alone a credential program. And if we want folks to teach in the community they grew up in, we need to get them resources there and not make them go. And I just wanna say that we don't wanna lose sight of that piece.
Really appreciate that point. Thank you, everyone.
And I just want to quickly add, with these examples of Maria, who you mentioned, and having folks from their own communities work in their schools, what we see in the research is that this is better for kids. Having these educators in schools means improved outcomes for the children in those schools because they can see themselves reflected in their educators, and their educators' lived experience and knowledge about the experiences of their students and the children in their schools helps to lift them up and benefit them. So I just want to make sure that. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. I'd love to get a round of applause for our more time, but my apologies, so thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. We're going to invite up Mr. David Alvarez, Assembly Member from the 80th District. He's a proud son of Mexican immigrants and the youngest of 6 siblings. He also serves as the chair of the Assembly Budget Subcommittee on Education and the Select Committee on Reconnecting Communities. Mr. Alvarez, thank you.
Well, good morning. I am pleased to be here at the close of your work today, and I want to start off by first saying and acknowledging that sometimes, at least on paper, folks like myself who am working on education issues, chairing the Education Subcommittee on Finance for our schools, may not appear like perhaps the perfect fit for the role. And acknowledging that so many of you in this room, likely everybody in this room, comes with vastly much more experience than I do when it comes to issues such as we're discussing here today. But as a parent, as a former student, as a parent of a high school student now, an outgoing elementary school student, I think the perspective that I bring, I would like to just remind everyone that there's probably at least 100 or so other members of the state legislature making decisions that happen that impact the work that you all do that may be more similar to my background than to yours. All that to say is that listening to you and your voice is really, really critical to the work that we do. And so that's why I appreciate the invitation being here. I would also like to say, though, I have a lived experience, which is that I come from a community in San Diego, born and raised from immigrant parents who never had even a first-year education, never had a 1 year of formal education, English learner, lived in poverty, high area of crime in San Diego, and that I am proud to do this work today, and I am so committed to this work today because I know, and I say this all the time, that if it weren't for my public education opportunities, both K through 12 and in public education in college at a university, I would not be where I am today. And that's why your work really, really matters and why I'm so passionate about it. And I want to take the moment to thank the people, certainly the teachers who always believed in me, and a kid like me who was not supposed to make it, in a community where I still live in that community where 1% of our community has a college education. That is the type of community that I come from, and where the commitment clearly is so easy to identify in the teachers that I had, but also in the other support systems that are at our schools, including counselors who along the way made sure that I stayed the course and that I had the opportunity to pursue higher education. So I want to first of all thank all of you for the work that you do to that, and obviously acknowledge my educators in my life. And then secondly, I want to say that in this role, I haven't said it yet, but it's been about a year in this role, and I have amazing support in our committee consultant, Erin Gable, who you all know. I want to ask for a round of applause. She has been the backbone of education in the Assembly, and we are really tremendously lucky to have her. Thank you, Erin, for all the work that you do. So the way I look at the issue of teacher recruitment and that I've learned and I've listened to here today, and certainly I'm sure continue to learn, is that this is a challenge that our state is facing, but that is not unique to education. Workforce needs exist almost in any industry. As I talk to people throughout the state and they come to visit me here in Sacramento, it is one of the largest problems that we have in our economy. The fact that we don't have the prepared workforce to do the jobs that our economy demands. At the most importantly though, it's through our education that we prepare that workforce. So it makes sense that we start with making sure that we have a prepared workforce of educators, first and foremost, so that we can have a prepared workforce out in the community. And that's why this conversation is so important. We are continuing to face those sort of shortages in the economy, again, like I said, in every single sector. So I think the ongoing role of the state and education workforce is certainly important in both in the recruitment and the retention. I heard that loud and clear. And it's something that we've attempted to address over the last few years, certainly before I got into this position, but now continue to do so. And we've got to find a way to make it serious and permanent. And to signal the one disheartening thing as I lived, right after college in the great recession that we had, was how people wanted to enter the education workforce, but nobody was really excited about the pink slips being issued every single year for a series of years throughout the entire state. The lack of certainty in that future career does not help us to address this issue. I think we've done a good job with how we've now funded schools in ensuring that is less of an issue. But where we have continue to fall short is on ensuring that we treat our teachers and our future teachers with the certainly the dignity of entering the workforce, first and foremost, with some compensation. This idea that we want to have more teachers, but we ask them to go and serve hours and hours and not be able to provide perhaps for their families in an economy like the one we have with the cost of living issues that were identified by your previous panel is just ridiculous. We're never going to solve this issue unless we solve the issue of compensating individuals for their value, and that starts with teachers when they begin their career. And I think that that's one thing that we're learning and that you've all learned about and heard about today with the programs that we have, whether it's the Golden State Teachers Program or the residency programs. Those are things that I think we need to continue to focus on. I also want to make a plug, and I don't want to run too long here, but I want to make a plug for diversity and that it matters, especially in a time that we are living in today, unfortunately. It really does matter because myself as a kid, and you know my background already, I really believe that if I don't see you, I can't be you as a kid. And that definitely starts in the classroom. That doesn't have to mean that I have to have someone that looks like me as a teacher, but it certainly needs to me means that there's a community and a school environment, a school environment that is diverse, because I have seen firsthand as I've been involved in my children's education at our schools as a PTA leader, that when we have that and we invest and we believe in that diversity, that then it's just not just a diversity in terms of faces, but it's a diversity in terms of ideas and of others who then make it onto our school campuses where kids can see themselves doing other things. So I think we need to maintain the focus on ensuring that the programs that we fund continue to produce higher quality and newer teachers and experiences for teachers that create a diverse talent for our schools throughout the state. The last thing I'll leave you with is that I think we should definitely mention is compensation, which is absolutely critical, and it's disheartening to hear the 72 cents to the dollar. That's certainly not appropriate. But that starts with the investment that we make as a state, because at the end, those dollars flow to the school districts, and then they do the compensation of teachers at that level and other educators. So as we look to fund our schools more adequately, I think one of the conversations that we're looking to have this year certainly is how do we fund at a base level, but also in areas of concentration and certainly supplemental, and areas where the need is the highest for communities. That is a conversation that we must continue to also have, and I don't think it's one or the other. I think we can do both, and we shall do both, and the only way that we can be successful for our kids is to do both. So I'm looking forward to that conversation, to conversations through our budget discussions on more programs that are become more stable, utilizing the data. You've been to any one of my committee hearings. We always want to know, is this working, and how is it working best? And if it's so, then we're going to continue to double down on those investments. And that's what I'm looking forward to do. And again, I want to thank you for the work that you do in helping us accomplish that. Thank you very much.
I know it's really hard to believe, but that was 2 hours, and that was a lot. I think that could have been a couple of days. So thank you everyone for being here. Just want to give, again, a huge shout out to all of our presenters, folks doing the remarks, Mr. Marisucci, Mr. Alvarez, thank you so much for being here. Can we do a quick thing from the LPI folks in the room? Put your hand up real fast. All right, I just want to say thank you to our LPI colleagues for all the help and Jason and Leslie are outside, so please say thank you to them. They help to coordinate and plan all of this and help us to all be here today, so thank you very much for their effort and their time. So on the way out, say thank you to them, please. And then you will be receiving, there's a QR code for all the related research, and we'll also be sending out a survey. We really appreciate this. Please remember that this discussion is not over, obviously. This has been decades in the making to get to where we are with the shortage, and now it's our time to really begin to fight and address it in systemic ways. So looking forward to engaging with folks. If you had a question that was not answered and you want to email it to us, we can then work on getting a response to it and get it back to you from there. So that's it. Thank you so much for your time today, and stay in touch. Thank you.